Welcome to today's story of love, life, and betrayal. For more free stories and entertainment from our channel, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe with notifications. Now, let's dive into Neighborhood Nightmare, a story that proves sometimes good fences make good neighbors, but bad neighbors make great stories. Tina Tomlinson stood in her backyard at 6:47 a.m., staring at the chain-link fence that had appeared overnight along what her neighbor claimed was the property line. The problem was, the fence was clearly on Tina's side of the actual boundary, cutting off a 3-foot strip of her carefully maintained garden and blocking access to her storage shed. "Are you kidding me?" Tina muttered, watching her neighbor Linda Cross emerge from her house with a smug smile and a cup of coffee. "Morning, Tina," Linda called out cheerfully. "Like the new fence? I had it installed yesterday while you were at work. Hope you don't mind, but I checked the property records and that strip of land has been mine all along." Tina had lived in her modest 2-bedroom house on Maple Street for 8 years, and until Linda Cross had moved in next door 6 months ago, she'd never had a single problem with any neighbor. Her previous neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had been a sweet elderly woman who brought Tina homemade cookies and helped her plant the rose garden that was now on the wrong side of Linda's fence. But Linda Cross had declared war on Tina from day one, and the fence was just her latest escalation in what had become an increasingly petty and vindictive campaign of harassment. It had started with complaints about Tina's dogs. Tina had 2 rescue mutts, Charlie and Daisy, who were the sweetest, quietest dogs in the neighborhood. They barked occasionally when strangers approached the house, but they were generally calm and well-behaved. Linda had immediately started filing noise complaints with the city, claiming that Tina's dogs barked constantly and were disturbing her peace. When the animal control officer came to investigate, he'd found no evidence of excessive barking and had actually complimented Tina on how well-trained her dogs were. Then, Linda had started calling the homeowners association about Tina's lawn care. She claimed that Tina's grass was too long, her flower beds were unsightly, and her garden gnome collection was lowering property values. The homeowners association had dismissed every complaint, but Linda kept filing them anyway. Next came the package theft. Tina had noticed several deliveries going missing from her front porch, only to see identical items appearing in Linda's yard days later. When Tina mentioned this to other neighbors, she discovered that Linda had been stealing packages from multiple houses on the street. But the fence was Linda's boldest move yet. She'd clearly researched the property lines and decided to claim a piece of Tina's land, probably knowing that most people wouldn't bother with the expense and hassle of fighting it. Unfortunately for Linda, she'd picked the wrong neighbor to mess with. Tina Tomlinson was a forensic accountant who specialized in fraud investigation. She spent her days uncovering financial crimes and building ironclad cases against people who thought they were smarter than the system. Patience, attention to detail, and strategic thinking were literally her job requirements. If Linda wanted a war, Tina was prepared to win it. Tina's first move was to hire a professional surveyor to establish the exact property boundaries. As she'd suspected, Linda's fence was encroaching on Tina's land by almost 4 feet at its widest point. But instead of demanding that Linda remove the fence immediately, Tina decided to document everything and build a comprehensive case against her neighbor's harassment campaign. She installed security cameras around her property, capturing Linda's trespassing, package theft, and various other illegal activities. She also started a detailed log of every complaint, every incident, and every interaction with Linda. Meanwhile, Tina began her investigation into Linda Cross's background. What she discovered was fascinating. Linda had a history of neighbor disputes at her previous 3 addresses, each escalating to legal action before Linda would suddenly move away. She'd been evicted from 2 rental properties for harassing other tenants, and she'd been sued by neighbors for property damage and harassment. Linda Cross was a professional neighbor from hell who seemed to enjoy creating chaos and conflict wherever she lived. But Tina also discovered something else. Linda was renting her house from an out-of-state landlord who had no idea about his tenants' history of property disputes. Tina smiled as she realized that Linda had made a crucial mistake. By installing a permanent fence on disputed property, she'd committed an act that could result in immediate eviction under most standard lease agreements. But Tina decided to let Linda's harassment campaign continue for a while longer. She wanted to build the strongest possible case before she made her move. Over the next month, Linda escalated her attacks on Tina. She started playing loud music at all hours, shining bright floodlights into Tina's bedroom windows, and even throwing trash over the fence into Tina's yard. Linda also began spreading rumors about Tina to other neighbors, claiming that Tina was running an illegal business from her home, that her dogs were dangerous, and that she was the source of various neighborhood problems. Tina documented everything, building a file that would make any prosecutor proud. But Linda's biggest mistake was targeting Tina's dogs. One morning, Tina discovered that someone had thrown meat laced with a mild sedative over her fence. Charlie and Daisy had eaten some of it and were groggy and disoriented when Tina found them. A trip to the emergency vet confirmed that the dogs had been drugged but would be fine. The vet also provided documentation of the incident and took samples of the remaining meat for analysis. Tina was furious. Messing with her property was one thing, but endangering her pets was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. It was time to end Linda Cross's reign of terror. Tina's counterattack was methodical and devastating. First, she contacted Linda's landlord and provided him with a comprehensive report on his tenant's behavior. The report included photos of the illegal fence, documentation of property damage, evidence of harassment of neighbors, and proof that Linda was violating multiple terms of her lease agreement. The landlord was horrified. He'd had no idea about Linda's history or her current behavior, and he was facing potential liability for her actions. "Ms. Tomlinson, I am so sorry about this situation," he told Tina during their phone conversation. "I'll be starting eviction proceedings immediately." Next, Tina filed a formal complaint with the police about the attempted poisoning of her dogs. The meat samples had tested positive for sedatives, and the security camera footage showed Linda throwing the contaminated food over the fence. Tina also filed complaints with the city about the illegal fence, the noise violations, the harassment, and the property damage. She provided documentation for every incident, along with video evidence and witness statements from other neighbors who had been affected by Linda's behavior. But Tina's masterstroke was her complaint to the Homeowners Association. Linda had been filing frivolous complaints against Tina for months, wasting the Homeowners Association's time and resources. Now Tina filed a comprehensive complaint against Linda, documenting every violation of Homeowners Association rules and community standards. The complaint included evidence of Linda's loud music, her bright floodlights, her failure to maintain her yard, her harassment of neighbors, and her installation of an unauthorized fence. Tina also included statements from other neighbors who had been affected by Linda's behavior, creating a clear pattern of community disruption. The Homeowners Association board was not amused. "Ms. Cross has been abusing our complaint system while simultaneously violating numerous community standards herself," the board president told Tina. "We'll be taking immediate action." Within a week, Linda Cross was facing eviction proceedings, criminal charges for animal cruelty, multiple city violations, and thousands of dollars in Homeowners Association fines. But Tina wasn't done yet. She discovered that Linda had been running a small online business selling handmade crafts, and she'd been using Tina's address to ship packages when her own address was temporarily unavailable due to postal service issues. This meant that Linda had been committing mail fraud, which was a federal offense. Tina reported Linda's mail fraud to the Postal Inspection Service, providing evidence of packages addressed to Linda but delivered to Tina's address. Linda's carefully constructed life of harassment and chaos was falling apart on multiple fronts simultaneously. The confrontation came on a Tuesday morning when Linda realized that her reign of terror was over. Tina was watering her flowers when Linda stormed out of her house, waving a stack of legal papers. "This is all your fault," Linda screamed. "You've ruined everything." "Actually," Tina replied calmly, "you ruined everything yourself. I just documented it. I'm being evicted. The police want to arrest me. The Homeowners Association is fining me thousands of dollars, and now the Postal Service is investigating me." "That's what happens when you break multiple laws and harass your neighbors," Tina said, continuing to water her plants. "Actions have consequences. You can't do this to me. I'll sue you. I'll make your life miserable." Tina turned off her hose and looked directly at Linda. "Linda, you've been trying to make my life miserable for 6 months. You stole my packages, filed false complaints, installed an illegal fence, and tried to poison my dogs. The only thing I did was document your behavior and report it to the appropriate authorities. But I'm losing everything. You should have thought of that before you decided to be a professional nightmare neighbor." Linda started crying, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. "I just wanted you to move away. You have such a nice house and such a perfect life, and I was jealous." Tina felt a moment of sympathy, but then she remembered her dogs lying sedated in the emergency vet clinic. "Linda, if you'd just been a normal neighbor, we could have gotten along fine. But you chose harassment and vandalism and animal cruelty. Now, you have to deal with the consequences." Linda's eviction was finalized 2 weeks later. She moved out in the middle of the night, leaving behind the illegal fence and several $1,000s in unpaid fines and legal fees. But the best part came when Tina met Linda's replacement. The new tenant was Martha Williams, a retired librarian who loved gardening and had 2 cats named Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte. "I heard about the previous tenant," Martha told Tina when she introduced herself. "The landlord was very apologetic about the situation. He's offered to remove that fence and restore your property line at no cost to you." "That's very generous of him," Tina replied. "He also mentioned that you were instrumental in documenting the problems. He said you probably saved him from a very expensive lawsuit." Within a week, the illegal fence was gone. Tina's garden was restored, and she had a new neighbor who brought her homemade bread and asked for advice about planting roses. But the story didn't end there. 3 months later, Tina received a phone call from a woman named Sarah Chen, who lived in Linda's new neighborhood. "I got your number from the landlord at Linda's old place," Sarah explained. "I'm having problems with my new neighbor, Linda Cross, and he suggested I talk to you about how you handled your situation." Tina smiled. "Let me guess, noise complaints, package theft, and harassment?" "All of that. Plus she's claiming that my fence is on her property and she's threatened to have my dog taken away." "Sarah, let me share some advice about dealing with Linda Cross." Tina spent an hour walking Sarah through the documentation process, explaining how to build a case against Linda's harassment and providing contact information for the various agencies that could help. 6 weeks later, Sarah called back to report that Linda had been evicted again and was facing criminal charges in her new city. "I followed your advice exactly," Sarah said. "Documentation, evidence, and patience. It worked perfectly." Tina realized that Linda Cross was going to continue her pattern of neighbor harassment until she faced serious consequences that couldn't be avoided by simply moving to a new location. So Tina created a website called Professional Problem Neighbors, where people could report habitual neighbor harassers and share information about their experiences. Linda Cross was the first profile on the site, complete with photos, documentation of her harassment patterns, and a list of her previous addresses. Within 6 months, the site had dozens of profiles and was helping people across the country deal with problem neighbors who moved from place to place, spreading chaos. Tina also started consulting with people who were dealing with neighbor harassment, teaching them how to document incidents, build legal cases, and protect themselves from retaliation. The key, she would tell her clients, is to be more patient and more thorough than your harasser. They're usually acting on impulse and emotion, but you can beat them with strategy and evidence. A year after Linda's eviction, Tina was working in her restored garden when Martha called over from next door. "Tina, I'm making a pot roast for dinner. Would you like to join me?" "I'd love to," Tina replied, thinking about how different her life was now compared to the months of harassment she'd endured. That evening, as she shared dinner with her friendly neighbor and watched her dogs playing peacefully in the yard, Tina reflected on what she'd learned from the experience. Revenge wasn't about destroying someone, it was about refusing to be a victim and holding people accountable for their actions. Linda Cross had chosen to be a professional harasser, moving from neighborhood to neighborhood, causing problems for innocent people. But she'd finally picked on someone with the skills and determination to fight back effectively. Tina had used Linda's own behavior against her, documenting everything and allowing Linda to dig her own grave with escalating violations of laws and community standards. The most satisfying part wasn't Linda's eviction or legal troubles. It was the knowledge that Tina had potentially saved future neighbors from Linda's harassment by creating a system for tracking and reporting habitual problem neighbors. Sometimes, Tina told Martha over dessert, the best revenge is making sure the person can't hurt anyone else the same way they hurt you. That's very wise, Martha replied, and much more constructive than putting up with bad behavior or getting caught up in endless conflicts. Tina nodded, looking out at her peaceful garden, where her dogs were chasing fireflies in the evening light. The fence wars were over, and the good guys had won. But more importantly, Tina had learned that standing up to bullies, even neighborhood bullies, was worth the effort, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon against harassment was simply the truth, properly documented and strategically deployed. She'd also learned that good neighbors were worth their weight in gold, and that a little kindness and mutual respect could make all the difference in creating a peaceful community. As for Linda Cross, she'd learned that there were consequences for treating people badly, and that some people would fight back more effectively than she'd ever imagined. The last Tina heard, Linda had been evicted from 2 more apartments and was facing a class action lawsuit from former neighbors seeking damages for harassment. Sometimes, Tina thought with satisfaction, the best revenge was simply letting people face the natural consequences of their own bad choices. Thanks for listening to today's story of love, life, and betrayal. For more free stories and entertainment from our channel, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe with notifications.